The rain had just stopped when Adam stepped off the bus, leaving the street slick and shining like a mirror reflecting a life he barely recognized. The town was quiet, almost hesitant, as if it were unsure how to greet a stranger who carried so much weight in his chest. He stood there longer than necessary, holding his worn bag, listening to the echo of the engine fading into the distance. When the sound was gone, he felt the familiar loneliness settle in, heavy and intimate. Adam had not planned to come here. In truth, he had stopped planning anything years ago. He moved when staying became unbearable and stayed when moving felt pointless. Life had become a series of pauses rather than progress, moments stitched together by exhaustion and memory. 3 years earlier, his world had ended in a hospital corridor that smelled of disinfectant and grief. His wife, Sarah, had slipped away quietly after a battle she never deserved to fight. Adam remembered holding her hand, feeling its warmth fade, listening to the steady beat that eventually flattened into silence. He remembered promising her he would be okay, even as he knew he was lying. After the funeral, people told him time would heal. They said grief softened, that life would slowly regain color. What they didn't say was how lonely survival could be. Adam woke every morning expecting to hear Sarah humming in the kitchen, expecting to feel her presence beside him. Instead, there was only space. The town greeted him with narrow streets and modest houses. Nothing grand, nothing demanding. He found a small motel near the edge of town and paid for a week. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old memories. It was enough. On his second day, he wandered into a cafe that overlooked a quiet square. The place was nearly empty. A woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. It wasn't the polite smile of obligation, but something warmer. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Coffee," Adam replied. His voice sounded rough, unused. She poured it carefully, sliding the cup toward him. "You're new." "Just passing through," he said automatically. She raised an eyebrow. "That's what everyone says." Her name was Emma. She owned the cafe and lived above it. There was a steadiness to her, a calm that felt earned rather than inherited. Adam returned the next day, and the next. Soon, coffee turned into conversation. Conversation turned into familiarity. Emma didn't ask many questions, but when she did, they felt intentional. She spoke of the town, of how people came and left, of how some stayed without realizing why. Adam found himself listening, grateful for the distraction. Days passed. Noah found work helping an old mechanic named Arthur fix cars. His hands remembered how to be useful. At night, he returned to the boarding house, to dinners shared with strangers who slowly became familiar faces. Clara and Noah began walking together in the evenings. She showed him the river that curved around the town, the old bridge where teenagers carved their names into the wood. One night, as they stood watching the water move beneath them, Clara said, "You carry something heavy." Noah stiffened. "Everyone does. Some weights change how you walk," she replied gently. He didn't answer. But later, alone in his room, her words echoed. He thought of Lily, of the promise he had broken without knowing it would be the last. Weeks turned into months. Noah stopped thinking of leaving. He began to imagine a future measured not by escape but by presence. That scared him more than anything else. One evening, as they sat in the library after closing, Clara told him about her past. Her husband had died young. An illness that didn't care about plans or fairness. She had loved deeply and lost painfully. "Grief doesn't leave," she said softly. "It just changes shape." Something inside Noah cracked open. He told her everything. The missed pickup. The accident. The guilt that followed him like a shadow. He expected her to pull away, to see him as broken beyond repair. Instead, she reached across the table and held his hand. "You didn't choose that night," she said. "But you're choosing how to live now." The words settled slowly, like snow. Just as Noah began to believe in the possibility of peace, the past found him. A letter arrived from his mother. His father was sick, the kind of sick that did not allow for postponement. Noah stared at the envelope for hours before opening it. He told Clara that night. "I have to go back," he said. "I don't know if I can return." Fear flickered across her face, but she nodded. "Then go. You don't heal by running from love. You heal by facing what hurts." Leaving felt like tearing something newly healed. The city greeted him with familiar noise and suffocating memories. His father lay fragile and smaller than Noah remembered. They spoke little, but sometimes silence was enough. His father died quietly one morning, holding Noah's hand. With him went years of unresolved tension, leaving Noah with a grief that felt both new and old. After the funeral, Noah stood in his childhood home, surrounded by echoes. He could stay, he could disappear again, or he could return to the life he had begun to build. He chose to go back. When he arrived in the town, autumn had painted everything gold. Clara stood by the river, as if she had been waiting. When she saw him, she didn't run. She simply smiled, tears in her eyes. "You came back," she said. "I was always coming back," he replied. They stood together, watching the water flow forward, carrying everything that could not be held onto forever. Noah learned that healing was not a destination. It was a series of choices made daily. To stay, to love, to forgive himself. Years later, when he spoke of Lily, it no longer felt like punishment. It felt like remembrance. Love did not end with loss. It transformed. On a quiet evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Noah realized he was no longer running. He was home. At night, the memories returned with force. He dreamed of Sarah, alive and laughing, only to wake with the ache of absence pressing against his ribs. One evening, unable to stay inside, he walked until he found himself by the river. The water moved steadily, indifferent to his pain. He envied it. Running won't make it hurt less. Adam turned. Emma stood a few feet away, her coat pulled tight against the cold. "I wasn't running," he said. "No," she replied gently. "You were standing still." They sat by the river in silence. The kind that didn't demand explanation. Eventually, Adam spoke. He told her about Sarah. About the promises. About the anger he felt toward a world that kept moving without her. "I don't know who I am without her," he admitted. Emma nodded. "I said the same thing when my brother died," she said quietly. "It took me years to understand that love doesn't disappear when someone does. It changes where it lives." The words settled slowly, like dust after a storm. Days blended into weeks. Adam began helping Emma at the cafe. Simple things. Fixing shelves. Cleaning tables. Being useful again felt like breathing after being underwater. The town began to recognize him. He stopped counting the days. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. His old house had sold. The last physical tie to his past life was gone. The realization hit harder than he expected. That night, the grief returned full force. "I feel like I'm betraying her by moving on," Adam confessed, his voice breaking. Emma looked at him with quiet certainty. "Living isn't betrayal," she said. "It's testimony." Something shifted inside him. Winter came softly. Snow dusted the streets, and the cafe filled with warmth and laughter. Adam felt himself changing, not forgetting, but carrying the pain differently. He still missed Sarah, always would. But the ache no longer controlled him. One evening, as the town gathered for a small festival, Adam realized he was smiling without effort. The realization startled him. Emma stood beside him, their shoulders touching. "You stayed," she said. "So did you," he replied. In that moment, Adam understood that healing was not about replacing what was lost. It was about allowing life to continue alongside grief. When spring arrived, the river swelled with melted snow, rushing forward with purpose. Adam stood by its edge, feeling the sun on his face. He thought of Sarah, of love that shaped him, of loss that taught him endurance. He was still healing. But for the first time, he was no longer lost. The train station smelled of rust and rain, the kind of smell that clung to memory long after you left. Noah stood beneath the flickering lights, his coat too thin for the cold, his hands buried deep in his pockets as if he could hide his past there. People moved around him in hurried lines, dragging suitcases, checking watches, living lives that felt impossibly distant from his own. He had nowhere to go and too many places he was trying to escape. It had been 3 years since the night everything collapsed. 3 years since the phone call that split his life into before and after. He remembered every detail with painful clarity. The sound of his mother's voice breaking. The way the room had tilted as if the earth itself had shifted. His younger sister, Lily, gone in a moment that could not be undone. An accident, they said. A word that felt too small to contain the weight of what it took. After that night, Noah stopped believing in stability. He drifted from city to city, job to job, carrying guilt like a second spine. He was supposed to pick Lily up that evening. He had been late. That fact replayed in his mind endlessly, reshaping itself into 1,000 different outcomes where she lived and he arrived on time. None of them mattered. Reality remained unchanged. The train arrived with a scream of metal against metal. Noah boarded without checking the destination. Movement was enough. Motion kept the memories from catching him too easily. When the train stopped again, the town felt unfamiliar but quiet. Small. The kind of place where secrets were harder to hide but easier to forgive. He stepped off, rain soaking through his shoes, and followed the road until it led him to a boarding house with a faded sign and warm light glowing from its windows. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of soup and old wood. A woman stood behind the counter, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes kind but sharp. She studied him for a moment. "You look like someone who needs a room," she said. "I just need a night," Noah replied. She nodded. "Most people do. Some stay longer." The room was small but clean. Noah lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tap against the window. Sleep came reluctantly, filled with dreams of flashing headlights and Lily's laughter turning into silence. Morning brought sunlight and a strange sense of calm. Downstairs, the boarding house was alive with soft conversation. Noah sat at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee, when a woman approached him. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. He looked up and shook his head. She sat, smiling politely. There was something tired but steady about her, like someone who had learned how to keep going even when it hurt. Her name was Clara. She worked at the local library and had lived in the town her entire life. "You're not from here," she said. "No," Noah replied. "Just passing through." "Passing through is how most people end up staying," she said with a small smile. They talked easily, about simple things at first. The weather, the town, books. Clara had a way of listening that made him forget to be guarded. When she laughed, it was quiet but genuine, like she wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone.